Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep on Future's Dirty Sprite 2, or DS2 as I'm sure most of you know it, dropped back in July 2015. And man, this wasn't just another album, this was a turning point. Not just for Future's career, but for hip-hop as a whole, really.
It really did signal a shift, didn't it? Like DS2 is future, raw, and unfiltered. It captures a specific moment in time. For him, for the music, it's almost like a sonic time capsule, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. To really get why it was such a big deal, though, we got to rewind a bit, right?
Yeah.
So before DS2, we had Honest in 2014. Now, Honest was supposed to be Future's big mainstream crossover. Kanye, Pharrell, even Miley Cyrus. He had some huge names on there.
Yeah, that was definitely a calculated move to reach a wider audience, but honestly, it didn't land with all of Future's fans. I think especially for those who were drawn to his earlier stuff, the grittier, more underground sound.
Right, like he was trying to fit into a mold that wasn't quite him. And this wasn't just happening in the music. Future's personal life was, well, kind of a mess at the time. The breakup with Ciara, fans being divided over the direction of his music. All of that added to this feeling of uncertainty.
And then DS2 drops. And it's like a direct response to all that chaos. Instead of trying to please everyone, he goes inward and creates this incredibly raw, almost claustrophobic sound.
And speaking of the sound, we can't forget that opening track, Thought It Was a Drought. It hits you immediately with the sound of, well, codeine being poured into soda.
Yeah.
Not exactly subtle.
A bold statement right from the jump. And musically, DS2 is a complete departure from Honest. It's dark, hypnotic, almost suffocating at times. Metro Boomin and Southside on production, they really created this world that pulls you into Future's headspace. Just listen to the beats on I Serve the Bass or Groupies.
It's like you say, claustrophobic, but also kind of luxurious at the same time. Trapped in like a velvet-lined dungeon or something.
Yeah.
And that brings us to what I find so fascinating about DS2, the contradictions. Future's not just the heartbroken guy or the king of the club. He's both, this hero and villain, wrestling with his wins and what they cost him.
And the lyrics definitely reflect that. In I Serve the Bass, when he says, tried to make me a pop star and they made a monster, you hear the bitterness towards the industry, but also this acknowledgement that he's become something different, something maybe he didn't intend to be.
Yes, and that complexity runs through the whole album. Pain, for example, is a recurring theme. And not just romantic heartbreak, but this deeper emotional pain, the consequences of choices made. You hear it in tracks like Slave Master and Blow a Bag. Even when he's talking about spending money, there's this undercurrent of, like, the party's about to end badly.
It's the other side of escapism, you know? Future is not glorifying substance abuse, but he's also not pretending it's not a part of his reality. He's laying it all out there, the highs, the lows. I think that honesty, the vulnerability is what makes DS2 connect with people so deeply.
Totally. But it's not all darkness. There are moments where Future steps back and reflects, almost like he's taking stock of everything.
Oh, absolutely. Though The Meaning is a perfect example. It's arguably the most introspective track on the whole album. He's talking about losing friends, mentors, the whole thing. Loyalty, betrayal, the price of success. There's a haunting sense of resignation there, like he's accepted these harsh realities.
That track is powerful. And speaking of things that hit hard, the production is insane. Metro Boomin and Southside created a soundscape that really reflects Future's state of mind.
They really are masters, aren't they? Take Blood on the Money, for instance. You've got these orchestral elements, almost cinematic in a way, but then the lyrics are all about the dark side of success. That contrast is powerful.
Yeah, it's like this slow-motion tragedy set to a beautiful but haunting score. And then you have Where Ya Yat featuring Drake, which is interesting because it's the only guest appearance on the entire album.
And it's done so well. Drake doesn't try to outshine Future. He blends into the narrative. It's like he's stepping into Future's world, experiencing it right alongside him.
Seamless. It's amazing how DS2 manages to be both deeply personal and incredibly relatable. I mean, whether it's heartbreak, battling your own demons, or chasing success, there's something in Future's story that resonates with so many people. Like he's holding up this cracked mirror to life, you know?
That's a great way to put it. It's real. DS2 doesn't offer easy answers or fairy tale endings. It's just a snapshot of someone navigating the messiness of existence. And I think that honesty, the fact that he's not pretending to have it all figured out, is what resonates. And thinking about DS2 as like a statement, it's important to remember what the hip-hop world was like back then. In 2015, you had more and more rappers getting introspective, you know, being vulnerable in their music. But Future? He took it to another level entirely.
Yeah, it wasn't just talking about feelings. It was like he was drowning you in them, like sonic therapy gone wrong.
Exactly. It challenged everything people thought they knew about how a successful rapper was supposed to sound. what they were supposed to rap about. DS2 wasn't about bragging or showing off. It was about confronting your demons, your flaws, even finding some kind of beauty in the struggle.
And it connected with so many people because, let's face it, life isn't all perfect Instagram posts. We all have our own dirty sprites, right? Our vices, the ways we cope with all the crap life throws at us. Future was just brave enough to put it all out there. No filter.
And that's why it became more than just an album. It was a cultural touchstone for a whole generation grappling with their own anxieties, trying to figure things out.
Definitely. And you can see the influence it had on artists who came after. The obvious ones like Travis Scott, Lil Uzi Vert.
Yeah.
But even artists who might not sound exactly the same, but definitely picked up on that honesty, that vulnerability.
Like Juice WRLD XXX Extentation. They were tapping into similar themes of pain, emotional turmoil. DS2 kind of paved the way for that, made it okay to explore those darker, more vulnerable parts of yourself.
Like Future gave everyone permission to be real, to stop pretending everything's perfect. And musically, DS2 really helped cement the dominance of trap music, but with a twist.
It wasn't just about the heavy 808s and catchy hooks anymore. It showed that trap production could have depth, versatility. You could have those dark, atmospheric beats like on I Serve the Bass, but then you also had tracks like Blood on the Money with those almost operatic strings, like a movie score.
It was like trap could be more than just party music. It could be used for storytelling, emotional release, even social commentary.
And it's funny how DS2 has aged. You'd think an album so tied to a specific time would feel dated, but honestly, it's become even more relevant now.
I think that's because of the themes, right? Love, loss, ambition, trying to find meaning. Those are things everyone grapples with no matter what era you're in.
Exactly. And its legacy goes beyond the music itself. DS2 reflects this larger cultural shift towards authenticity, embracing vulnerability, rejecting all that fake, polished stuff.
In a world obsessed with social media and filters, where everyone's pretending everything's perfect, DS2 feels like a breath of fresh air. It's a reminder that it's okay to be messed up, a work in progress.
And to be successful on your own terms. Remember, this album came out of Future feeling like he was being pushed into a box he didn't fit in. DS2 was him breaking free, saying, I'm doing this my way, even if some people don't get it.
And that message about staying true to yourself is powerful, especially for young artists trying to find their voice in an industry that can be pretty brutal.
It shows the power of creative freedom, the courage it takes to be vulnerable in your art. Sometimes the most impactful art comes from those dark places, those times when you're lost, uncertain.
That's true. There's just so much to unpack with DS2. Every time I listen, I find something new, some layer I hadn't noticed before.
That's the mark of a great album, right? It keeps evolving, keeps revealing new things to you.
One thing that always gets me is how DS2, even with all the darkness, has these moments of pure exhilaration.
Oh, absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom. There's defiance, taking control, even joy in the middle of all the chaos.
It's like Future saying, life might be a mess, but I'm going for it, riding the wave. And musically, you feel that in those bangers, the tracks that make you want to move get lost in the moment.
F up some commas, stick talk, even thought it was a drought. Those tracks just grab you.
And they highlight Future's incredible vocal range too, right? He goes from those melodic, almost trance-like flows to these aggressive, hard-hitting raps, sometimes in the same song. It's like he's embodying all these different parts of himself, these conflicting emotions.
Like duality, the way he embraces contradictions. That's what makes DS2 so captivating. It can't be categorized. It's messy, chaotic, beautiful, frustrating. It's human.
And in the end, that human element is what makes it timeless. It's a snapshot of a specific time, sure. But those themes, the emotions, they're universal. They'll always resonate.
It's why, all these years later, DS2 still speaks to people, inspires artists, starts conversations about success, the price of fame, staying true to yourself.
Well said.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to DS2 as a turning point, not just for Future, but for hip-hop as a whole.
It challenged the status quo, pushed boundaries, it opened up new possibilities for how hip-hop could sound, what it could be about.
It wasn't about just making hits anymore. It was about making a statement, creating something real, raw, honest.
And that's the legacy of DS2. It's a reminder that true artistry comes from vulnerability, from being willing to embrace the messiness of life and share that with the world.
And speaking of messiness, one thing that stood out to me was how Future uses specific production techniques to create that feeling of, well, of being messed up, kind of hazy.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely playing with sounds. You hear these, like, distorted synths, warped samples, those slowed down 808s that are almost, it's like they mimic the feeling of being disoriented under the influence.
Yeah. Like they captured the sound of altered perception, which, makes sense with the themes of the album. And speaking of themes, one thing that really struck me was how Future uses Dirty Sprite itself as a metaphor.
That's interesting. How so?
It's more than just the drink, the cough syrup.
Yeah.
The Dirty Sprite becomes a symbol for all the ways we try to escape, to numb ourselves, whether it's substances or money or even relationships that don't really mean anything.
I see what you're saying. It's that temporary fix, that escape from the pain, the pressure, and like the actual drink. It doesn't last. It's the cycle of up and down, up and down.
Exactly. And that's why it connects with people, right? We all have our own versions of Dirty Sprite, our own ways of coping, and Future doesn't shy away from the dark side of that.
He's laying it all out there, the good, the bad, the ugly. And honestly, that's what makes it so powerful, such an enduring piece of art.
For sure. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Dirty Sprite 2, I'm left with this admiration, I guess, for Future's artistry, his willingness to be vulnerable, to push boundaries.
And I think it's important to remember that this is more than just an album. It's a cultural artifact, a testament to the power of expression, a reminder that it's okay to be honest, to be flawed, to embrace the mess.
It's a reminder to be true to yourself, even when it's hard, even when it goes against everything else. So to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this thought. What art, what music, what creation speaks to your truth, even in those dark moments? Seek it out. Let it move you. And let it remind you that you're not alone,